Wondering why you're not landing interviews even when you know you're qualified? I just wrapped a hiring process for a digital strategist role, and I reviewed over 80 applications. In this episode, I'm going to share what I saw from the other side of the table, the most common and avoidable mistakes people made. Now, these aren't huge missteps. They're very small course corrections that can make a big difference. So whether you're job hunting, freelancing, or just curious about how hiring really works behind the scenes, I'm going to share what stood out. Hi, I'm Laverne McKinnon, and welcome to the Moonshot Mentor community. If you're navigating a career transition, whether you're stepping up, getting started, or making a pivot, you are in the right place. I'm a career strategist and a grief recovery specialist, and I love to help people going through career changes sort through the noise, spiritually, strategically, tactically, so then you can make moves that actually feel aligned. There's no need to go it alone. We can find your next move together. Okay, before I jump into the specifics, I just want to give you a little bit of backstory to get us started. So I originally posted the job opportunity with me on LinkedIn, and it had a link to a Google form and then a full job description. So I kept it up for about a week, and now I chose not to use other job sites because honestly, I just didn't want the hassle of learning the back end of a different platform. And I was also thinking that LinkedIn was going to help me find referrals because, it's people that I know, and I thought that that would be a really helpful thing for my process. Now, within 48 hours of that initial post, I got one direct email from someone who knew me, one referral from a colleague, and one blind application, someone that I didn't know. Now, it was a good start, but I really wanted to be so much more thorough. So I widened the search by creating a real job post on LinkedIn. Now, what I didn't realize is that LinkedIn charges $90 per day to post a real job opening. Now, they did give me 3 days free, which I totally accepted and was so happy to have that. But as a small business owner, I was not going to be spending $90 a day just to keep the listing active. Now, luckily, within 2 days of the real job posting, I got the additional applications. So I was up over 80 people who had applied, and that felt like plenty of applicants. So I shut down that job post and I started to jump into reviewing the applications. And honestly, I was so excited. I was especially thrilled to see that there were submissions from all over the world: Bangladesh, France, India, Mexico, Nepal, Nigeria, Pakistan, the Philippines, Poland, and of course, the United States. So most of the applications did come through after I had posted the real job listing on LinkedIn. And so that happened within the first 24 hours or so. And then there were a few applications that trickled in after 72 hours. But honestly, when those last applications started trickling in, I was already emotionally and mentally invested in other candidates by that point. So out of those over 80 applicants, I narrowed the list by half and I shared those files with my brand manager. She helped me get even more honest about what I actually needed in the role, and she held me accountable to the criteria that we had set up at the start when we wrote the job application. And then we eventually set up 8 interviews. Now, that honestly, it felt like a lot, but I also wanted to give anyone who seemed like a genuine match a real chance. So here's what helped applicants stand out during the application review process. First, clear portfolios that included a case study. The strongest candidates didn't just drop a link to a portfolio, they walked me through the work. A few shared mini case studies that showed how they helped a client overcome a challenge, what they contributed, and what the outcome was. So that level of detail, wow, it made it so much easier for me to picture what they would be like as a collaborator. The second thing was really about design sensibility, which is obviously so personal and not something that you can, have a tangible, checking certain boxes off. But this was something that set people apart because it was a social media manager role and a digital strategy role. So I was paying very close attention to layout, visuals, tone, clarity of messaging. Now, while I recognize that people can adapt their style to the client, I did want to make sure that their inherent sensibility aligned with mine. And then this might seem really obvious, but answering questions in the application, literally answering the questions in the application, it was so evident which people took the time to answer thoughtfully and specifically, while like a handful of people just gave responses that felt rushed or vague. And then there were like even a couple people who actually didn't answer some questions. Okay, now here's what raised red flags. Links to portfolios that didn't work. About a quarter of the applicants had portfolio links that like literally didn't work. They were broken. Or the applicants said, email me and I'll get you access to my portfolio. Now, I did take the extra time to email a few candidates whose resumes caught my eye, but in the big picture, I didn't want to actually have to go through extra hoops to figure out what their portfolio looked like. And then about 25% of the over 80 people who submitted the application, wow, they actually weren't qualified. Now, I know that there are some companies out there that encourage people to apply, even if you feel like you don't meet all of the qualifications. And I get that, and I love that idea conceptually in some ways. But I'll tell you what my beef is that it requires a real human to review the application and the resume to be able to see beyond, as opposed to relying on an algorithm. Now, I'm a one-person operation, and it took me a lot of time to review those 80 applications personally. I didn't use an algorithm or anything like that, but most companies are doing that. So I would say don't waste your time if you're not actually qualified and apply to a job from an aspirational perspective, because your resume is probably going to get booted because of an algorithm, and you're going to start to feel really bad about yourself for not getting any type of traction or response, and that could lead to burnout. And then finally, there were AI-generated portfolios that totally missed the mark. Now, I use AI myself, so I both appreciate the efficiency it creates, and I recognize the telltale signs of AI. 4 of the applicants appeared to have generated a portfolio using AI tools without any real direction or originality. The result? Work that actually didn't make sense, had factual mistakes, or simply didn't align with the role. Oh, wait, I do have one more that jumped out at me, which is that the hourly rates were outside my posted range. So I did include an hourly rate range in the job description, and I also asked candidates to share their typical rate to make sure that we were on the same page. About 10 applicants listed rates that were so outside of my budget. And again, I'm all about transparency here. I didn't move forward with them or really review their applications that closely because I felt like even if I fell in love with them on paper, I couldn't even come close to affording them. Okay, from there, it was time to meet the people behind the resumes and portfolios and see how they showed up in real time. So we scheduled 30-minute Zoom interviews with the 8 candidates, and the structure was pretty simple. I divided it up into like 20 minutes of questions from me and my colleague, and then reserved 10 minutes of time for the candidate to ask any questions that they might have. Here's what I noticed that made a huge difference during the actual interviews over Zoom. Rapport matters. So the role that I had, it's a remote role, and so we're going to be spending time together on Zoom. If someone has warm, open energy, or at least felt grounded, it really helped us connect quickly. And when some people came on screen with like a sour expression or low energy, it just took so much more effort to build rapport and trust. And so that did have an impact on me. Second, preparation is a form of respect. This was so awesome. One candidate showed up with a very short slide deck, and she walked us through her process, how she collaborates with clients, and even pitched a few quick ideas based on the job description. It was simple, and it showed initiative and made it easier to imagine us working together. Another great tip here that allowed certain candidates to stick out is to use your questions wisely. By that, I mean use your questions to showcase your skills and preferences. So one person asked about our best practices for communication, and they shared that they like to use Slack rather than email to check in on project status and priorities. Now, that kind of question not only showed that she was thinking ahead, it gave us a preview of what collaboration would feel like. It was pretty cool. Okay, and now here's some red flags during the interviewing process. This first one probably seems so obvious, but it happened. Someone interviewed with us from a public place, and it was so loud and so noisy, and the Wi-Fi wasn't great. So be sure that when you're interviewing and when you're in a professional setting, be in a place that's quiet and feels professional. The next thing that bumped me during the interview process is when people had generic or like scripted questions. So, like I said, we always left time for the candidates to ask us questions. And it was easy to tell who was genuinely curious versus who had Googled top 10 questions to ask in an interview. So, like one person asked about professional development opportunities, which is totally fine, but it honestly felt sort of disconnected because this is a part-time remote independent contractor role. And so professional development, I don't know, to me is just like not a natural part of being an independent contractor. And now this last one is a little bit nitpicky, but time zone confusion. With so many people working in a gig economy and over video conferencing, it's really important to understand time zone differences. So one person that we interviewed didn't realize that we were in different time zones, and then we had to reschedule the interview very late in the process. And while it wasn't the end of the world, I still felt like for a remote first role that kind of detail matters in terms of time zones. Okay, just being really transparent about where my head was at. Now, choosing just one person, wow, it was not easy. Most of the candidates we interviewed were thoughtful, prepared, and brought such a wide range of strengths. Now, the person that we eventually hired didn't check every single box on the job description. In fact, she was missing one key piece of experience, but the rest of her application and the fact that she came in as a referral made us curious to meet her. And when she did, and when we met with her, she knocked it out of the ballpark. That was so awesome. We had immediate rapport. She was specifically excited about the role because of the nature of my work and where I'm at in my social media journey. So she saw an opportunity to grow with me and to shine. And we talked openly about her experience gap, and she shared an example of how she had taught herself something similar in the past. She also spoke clearly about what sets her up for success and what makes her grumpy. That kind of insight is so gold. In the end, the deciding factor was the learning curve. The other finalists were also missing skills, but the ones that they were missing would take more time to develop. And for this particular role, I really needed someone who could hit the ground running. So if you've ever wondered what really happens behind the scenes, now you know. It's such thoughtful, messy human work on both sides. And to that end, I just want to share with you how I was diligent on my side, kind and responsive. It was really important to me to keep the process human and treat people like people and not robots. I also tried to be very clear about what I needed before the application process began. So I had a very detailed job description because I get that it takes a lot of time and energy to apply. So me having clarity would be important for any applicant as well to realize whether or not the opportunity was the right match for them. And then finally, follow-up. Everyone that I interacted with was professional and simply just wanted to know the outcome. So I responded to each person individually via email, whether they applied or they interviewed. So some final things to know when you are applying for a job. If you have at least 80% of the skills, apply. Be honest about your gaps and be specific about how you would approach them. I recommend if you don't have 80% of the skills, don't apply. It sort of becomes a waste of your energy, and chances are you're going to be spit out by the algorithm. Related to this is don't apply just for the heck of it or because you never know. Job hunting, and I'm telling you something that you already know, it can lead to burnout, so just be thoughtful about your choices. And then when you do get the interview, bring your unique energy and presence. It truly matters to creating rapport. Take the time to prepare thoughtful questions. Your curiosity is part of your pitch. Apply even if you don't have a referral. Most of the candidates we interviewed were not referrals, and they came really, really close. Okay, knowing what happens behind the scenes doesn't fix a stressful process, but it can hopefully make it feel a little less personal and a little more navigatable. All right, that's it for today. If you're not yet a paid Moonshot Mentor Substack subscriber and you want more support to stay motivated, feel less alone, and move through your career transition with strategy, purpose, and in clarity, come join my paid Substack community. It's $5 a month, and you get exclusive journal prompts, guided meditations, live workshops, and a really amazing community of ambitious, driven professionals. Sign up at moonshotmentor.substack.com. You'll also find all of my socials and ways to work with me there, either one-on-one or in a group setting. And a very big thank you to Amanda Kenny for the editing and social media expertise, and to Lauren Deacon, who manages the Moonshot Mentor brand and is an organizational and research genius. And thank you so very, very much for spending time with me today. Until next week, keep going after your moonshot.